In the fog-laden streets of Victorian London, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson are drawn into a chilling mystery in the quaint village of Threadhaven, where the delicate art of lace-making conceals a sinister secret. When Eliza Thorne, a master lacemaker, is found dead under inexplicable circumstances, her intricate lacework reveals clues to a hidden fortune, a web of betrayal, and a murderer who kills with the lightest touch. Narrated by Watson, this tale weaves sharp deductions, evocative dialogue, and a final twist that unravels the heart of the crime, delivering a resolution as satisfying as it is shocking. Chapter 1. The Enigmatic Letter. The autumn of 1889 had draped London in a shroud of fog, so thick it seemed the city held its breath, wary of exhaling secrets into the damp air. I, Dr. John Watson, sat by the hearth at 221B Baker Street, nursing a brandy and the lingering ache of an old war wound, while Sherlock Holmes, my singular friend and companion, paced the room with the restless energy of a caged panther. His violin lay abandoned on the table, its strings silent, a testament to the ennui that had gripped him for days. The absence of a case worthy of his intellect was to Holmes a torment far worse than any physical malady. "Watson," he remarked abruptly, halting mid-stride, "have you ever considered the fragility of human endeavor? The way a single thread, if pulled, might unravel an entire tapestry of existence." I glanced up from my newspaper, accustomed to his cryptic musings. "I suppose so, Holmes. But what prompts this?" He did not answer immediately, his sharp grey eyes fixed on the window, where the fog pressed like a spectral hand against the glass. Before I could press further, a sharp rap at the door shattered the stillness. Mrs. Hudson, our indefatigable landlady, entered, bearing a silver tray with a single letter. Its cream envelope, edged with a faint lace-like pattern, seemed incongruous amidst the clutter of our rooms, chemical apparatus, scattered papers, and the faint scent of tobacco ash. "A boy delivered it, Mr. Holmes," she said, her tone wary. "He was gone before I could ask his name." Holmes seized the letter with a swiftness that belied his earlier languor. He turned it over, inspecting the wax seal, a delicate emblem of crossed bobbins, before slicing it open with a penknife. As he read, his lips twitched into the faintest of smiles, a sign I had learned to associate with the scent of a challenge. "Read this, Watson," he said, tossing the letter to me. The handwriting was elegant, almost feminine, yet urgent in its strokes. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes, your reputation precedes you, sir, and it is with trembling hope that I write. In the village of Threadhaven, a shadow has fallen. My sister, Eliza Thorne, is dead, and though the coroner calls it a natural passing, I see murder in the threads she wove. Her lace, her life's work, holds secrets none here dare speak. I beg you, come to Threadhaven. The truth lies in the patterns, but I fear time unravels them swiftly. Enclosed is a token of her craft, a sample of her last work. Name your fee, and it shall be met. Yours in desperation, Margaret Thorne." Tucked within the envelope was a small square of lace, so fine it seemed spun from moonlight. Its pattern was intricate, a lattice of flowers and vines, with a curious asymmetry that caught the eye. I held it to the light, marveling at its delicacy, but Holmes' attention was elsewhere. He had already retrieved his magnifying glass, and was examining the envelope's seal with predatory focus. Threadhaven, I mused, recalling vague tales of a hamlet in Kent, known for its lace-making, a craft passed down through generations, its patterns guarded like heirlooms, a quaint place by all accounts, hardly the setting for murder. Holmes' eyes gleamed. Quaint places, Watson, are often the most deceptive. A village bound by tradition is a crucible for secrets, jealousy, greed, betrayal, all woven into the fabric of daily life. This lace, he gestured to the sample, is no mere trinket. Its irregularity is deliberate, a cipher perhaps. And this seal, note the wax's faint green tint, suggesting a rare compound, possibly from a local apothecary. Already, the threads of this case tighten. I felt the familiar stir of excitement, the promise of adventure banishing the fog's oppressive weight. "Shall we go then?" I asked, already anticipating the journey. Holmes was at the window now, his silhouette sharp against the swirling mist. "We shall, Watson. But first I must consult my index. Threadhaven's lace-making guild has a history, and history, like lace, is rarely without knots." He moved to the shelves, pulling down a leather-bound volume marked. His fingers danced across the pages, pausing at an entry that made his brow arch. "Curious," he murmured. "A scandal in 78, a lacemaker accused of forgery, vanished before trial. The name Thorn appears. This is no coincidence." The fire crackled, casting shadows that danced like the patterns in the lace. Holmes turned, his face alight with purpose. "Pack your revolver, Watson. We leave for Threadhaven at dawn. The game, as they say, is afoot." As we prepared for the journey, I could not shake the image of that lace, its delicate threads whispering of secrets yet to be unravelled. Little did I know how tangled those threads would prove, nor how deadly their design. "What did you think of the first chapter of Sherlock Holmes and the lacemaker's delicate murder? Where are you listening from? London's foggy streets, a quiet village like Threadhaven, or somewhere far across the globe? Share your location and thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for the next thrilling chapter. Your support helps unravel the next twist in this intricate tale. Chapter 2. Journey to Threadhaven. The dawn broke over London with a sullen reluctance, the fog of the previous night thinning to a grey haze that clung to the cobblestones like a lingering suspicion. Sherlock Holmes and I stood at Charing Cross Station, our breath visible in the chill air as the whistle of the 6:15 train to Kent pierced the morning. Holmes, clad in his Inverness cape and deerstalker, carried a small valise containing his chemical reagents and magnifying glass, while I bore my medical bag and the weight of curiosity about the enigmatic case awaiting us. The train rattled through the city's outskirts, trading soot-stained buildings for fields dappled with frost. Holmes sat opposite me, his sharp features softened by the dim light filtering through the carriage window. He had been silent since we boarded, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, lost in that private realm of thought where I could not follow. I ventured to break the quiet. "Holmes," I said, "what do you make of this Margaret Thorne?" Her letter was urgent, yet she offered no specifics beyond her sister Sip's death and that curious lace. Holmes' eyes flicked to me, gleaming with suppressed excitement. "Miss Thorne's reticence is itself a clue, Watson. She fears to commit too much to paper, suggesting either distrust of the post or a belief that her words are watched. The lace, however, is the true message. Its irregular pattern is not mere artistry. It is a code, a map, or perhaps a warning. I suspect Eliza Thorne's death is tied to something she wove into her work, something worth killing for." I nodded, recalling the delicate square of lace, now tucked safely in Holmes' zipped pocketbook. But murder in a village like Threadhaven, it seems so improbable. Improbable, Watson, but not impossible, he replied, a faint smile curling his lips. Small communities breed intense passions, rivalries over craft, inheritances, or secrets buried in plain sight. Threadhaven's lacemaking is renowned, yet its guild is insular, its traditions rigid. Such conditions are fertile ground for treachery. The train slowed as we approached Threadhaven, a hamlet nestled in a valley where the river Medway wound like a silver thread through meadows and copses. As we disembarked, the air carried a crisp sweetness, tinged with the faint scent of lanolin and lavender from the nearby fields. The station was little more than a platform with a weathered sign, and beyond it lay the village, a cluster of half-timbered cottages, their windows glowing faintly in the morning mist. At the heart of Threadhaven stood a stone church, its spire piercing the low clouds, and beside it a long, low building with a sign reading Thorne and Daughters Lacemaking. A young woman awaited us at the platform's edge, her attire modest yet refined, a grey wool dress with a high collar, her auburn hair pinned beneath a simple bonnet. Her eyes, red-rimmed but resolute, betrayed a sleepless night. She stepped forward as we approached. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson." Her voice was soft with a tremor of urgency. "I am Margaret Thorne. Thank you for coming so swiftly." Holmes inclined his head, his gaze sweeping over her with that uncanny scrutiny that missed nothing. "Miss Thorne, your letter intrigued me. Pray lead us to your home and tell us all you know of your sister Sict's death." She nodded, guiding us along a cobbled lane toward a cottage at the village's edge. As we walked, Threadhaven revealed itself in glimpses, women bent over lace pillows in open doorways, their bobbins clicking in a rhythmic dance, children darting between houses, their laughter sharp against the quiet, and men in rough tweed eyeing us with guarded curiosity from the steps of a public house. The village seemed to hum with a tension I could not yet name, as if every thread of its daily life was stretched taut. Margaret's cottage was modest but neat, its interior adorned with lace, doilies on tables, curtains of intricate filigree, and framed samples hung like portraits. She offered us tea, which I accepted gratefully, while Holmes declined, his attention fixed on a small display of lacework in the corner. One piece, half finished, hung on a wooden frame, its threads trailing like unanswered questions. "Eliza was found here," Margaret began, her voice steadying as she gestured to the parlour. "2 days ago, at dawn, she was seated at her lace pillow, her hands still holding the bobbins, but lifeless. The coroner said her heart failed, but Eliza was strong, healthy. She was only 32, Mr. Holmes, and there was no sign of struggle, no mark upon her. Yet I know she was murdered." Holmes' eyes narrowed. "What makes you so certain, Miss Thorne? Beyond instinct. What did you observe?" She hesitated, twisting a handkerchief in her hands. "It was her lace. Eliza was working on something unusual. She wouldn't show it to me, said it was a commission for a private client, but the night before she died, she was agitated, muttering about patterns that speaks and debts long due. And then, when I found her, the lace on her pillow, it wasn't right. The pattern was wrong, as if she'd woven something in haste or fear." Holmes crossed to the lace frame, his fingers brushing the delicate threads. "This is her final work?" he asked, producing his magnifying glass. "Yes," Margaret replied. "I haven't touched it since." Holmes studied the lace in silence, his face a mask of concentration. I joined him, peering at the intricate design, a web of roses and thorns, with an odd cluster of knots at one edge, unlike the symmetry of the other samples in the room. "Curious," Holmes murmured. "The knots form a sequence, irregular, yet deliberate. A cipher, perhaps, or a marker of intent." He turned to Margaret. Who else had access to this room? Who knew of Eliza Sept's work? "Only the family, our younger sister Clara, and our cousin Thomas, who helps with the guild SIP's accounts, and, perhaps her apprentice, Lydia Gray. But they all loved Eliza. She was the heart of Threadhaven SIP's trade, Mr. Holmes. Her patterns were unmatched, her skill a treasure." "Treasure," Holmes echoed, his tone sharp. "And treasures, Miss Thorne. Invite thieves, tell me, did Eliza have enemies? Rivals in the trade, perhaps?" Margaret Sitt's eyes flickered with unease. There was tension. "The guild is competitive. Mr. Harrow, a merchant from London, has been pressing to buy our patterns for years, but Eliza refused, and Lydia, her apprentice, was ambitious, perhaps too much so. But murder, I cannot believe it of them." Holmes straightened, his expression unreadable. "Belief, Miss Thorne, is a luxury we cannot afford. Facts alone will suffice. Watson, we shall inspect the workshop next. The threads of this mystery begin here, but they stretch far beyond this room." As we stepped into the crisp air, the village seemed to watch us, its quiet beauty masking a pulse of secrets. I glanced at Holmes, his profile resolute against the gathering dusk. Whatever lay ahead, I knew that Threadhaven's delicate facade would soon unravel under his relentless scrutiny. Chapter 3. The Lacemaker's Workshop. The morning sun struggled through the low clouds as Sherlock Holmes and I followed Margaret Thorne along a winding path to the heart of Threadhaven, where the Thorne and Daughters Lacemaking Workshop stood. The building was a sturdy timber-framed structure, its whitewashed walls softened by ivy and its wide windows revealing glimpses of women bent over their lace pillows, their hands moving with the precision of a well-rehearsed symphony. The air carried the faint clack of bobbins and the murmur of voices, a rhythm as integral to the village as its heartbeat. Margaret led us inside, where the scent of beeswax and linen greeted us, mingling with the damp earthiness of the river nearby. The workshop was spacious, its high ceiling crisscrossed with beams, and rows of tables lined with lace pillows stretched before us. Each pillow bristled with pins and threads, forming patterns of astonishing intricacy, flowers, vines, and geometric whorls that seemed to pulse with life. At the far end, a separate alcove was cordoned off by a velvet curtain, its entrance marked by a sign, "Eliza Thorne, Master Lacemaker." This was her domain, Margaret said, her voice low as she drew back the curtain. Eliza worked here alone, save for Lydia, her apprentice. No one else was permitted without her leave. Holmes stepped into the alcove, his eyes sweeping the space with predatory intensity. The area was small but meticulously organized. A single lace pillow dominated a polished oak table, its surface strewn with bobbins of fine thread, white, cream, and a curious shade of pale blue. Beside it stood a cabinet filled with spools, needles, and small glass vials of what appeared to be dyes or oils. A single chair, cushioned with faded velvet, faced the table, and above it hung a framed piece of lace, so delicate it seemed to float against the wall. The air here felt heavier, as if the room itself mourned its occupant. "Watson," Holmes said, gesturing to the lace pillow, "observe the arrangement. The bobbins are not in their usual order. Typically, a lacemaker aligns them symmetrically, yet here several are tangled as if abandoned mid-pattern. I peered at the pillow, noting the chaotic loops of thread. Perhaps she was interrupted, I suggested. Interrupted? Yes, Holmes replied, his voice sharp, but not by accident. The tangles form a deliberate disruption, a message or a mark of struggle concealed as carelessness. He produced his magnifying glass and bent over the pillow, his fingers hovering above the threads without touching them. And here note the faint stain on this bobbin, a trace of oil perhaps, but with an acrid undertone. Curious. Margaret, standing by the curtain, wrung her hands. Eliza was particular about her tools. She never leave her work in such a state. That's why I knew something was wrong. Holmes straightened, his gaze shifting to the cabinet. He opened it, inspecting the vials with the care of a chemist. One, half empty, caught his attention, a clear liquid with a faint greenish sheen. He uncorked it, sniffed briefly, and recoiled slightly. Interesting, he murmured, resealing it. Miss Thorne, did your sister use unusual substances in her lace-making, dyes perhaps, or treatments for the thread? Margaret frowned. She mixed her own dyes sometimes, but nothing out of the ordinary. Linen, silk and cotton threads, treated with wax or oil for smoothness. She was experimenting with new colors for a special commission, but she kept the details private. Holmes pocketed the vial with a deft motion, his expression unreadable. And this commission, who was it for? She wouldn't say, Margaret admitted. Only that it was for someone important, someone who paid well. She was excited, but guarded. She locked her sketches in that drawer. She pointed to a small drawer beneath the table, secured with a brass lock. Holmes knelt, examining the lock with his glass. Recently scratched, he noted. Someone attempted to force it, but the damage is superficial. The lock held. He produced a small tool from his valise, a slender pick, and within moments the drawer clicked open. Inside lay a leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with sketches of lace patterns, each more intricate than the last. Some were annotated with cryptic symbols, arrows, crosses, and what appeared to be a recurring motif of a single thorn. These are no mere designs, Holmes said, flipping through the pages. They're a code, layered within the lace itself. Your sister, Miss Thorne, was weaving secrets, as well as threads. He paused at a page where a single word was scrawled in Eliza's hand. Harrow. Mr. Harrow, the London merchant. I asked, recalling Margaret's mention of him the previous day. Indeed, Holmes said, his eyes gleaming. A man eager to acquire thorn patterns, yet rebuffed. Perhaps he sought more than designs. He closed the notebook and tucked it into his coat. We must speak with this Harrow, and soon. Before we could proceed, a young woman entered the alcove, her presence abrupt yet hesitant. She was slight, with sharp features and dark eyes that darted nervously between us. Her hands, calloused from lace-making, clutched a bundle of threads. Miss Margaret, she said, her voice tight, Clara sent me to fetch you. She's upset, says Thomas is arguing with the guild elders again. Margaret sighed. Lydia, this is Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. They supper here about Eliza. Lydia Gray's eyes widened, a flicker of fear crossing her face before she masked it with a curt nod. I'm her apprentice. Eliza was kind to me. Her words were clipped, as if she feared saying too much. Holmes studied her, his gaze piercing. Miss Gray, you worked closely with Eliza. Did she ever speak of threats, or of this mysterious commission? Lydia. Stet's fingers tightened around the threads. No, sir. She was private about her work. I only helped with the simpler patterns. She said, I wasn't set ready for her special projects. Indeed, Holmes said, his tone neutral but his eyes betraying a spark of interest. And where were you the night she died? Lydia flushed. In my room at the Guild Sips boarding house. I don't been sleep well, but I heard nothing unusual. Holmes nodded, dismissing her with a wave. Thank you, Miss Grey. We shall speak again. As Lydia retreated, Margaret led us back to the main workshop, where the other lacemakers paused to watch us pass. Their eyes held a mix of curiosity and wariness, as if we were intruders in a sacred space. Outside, the village seemed to close ranks around us, its quiet streets hiding whispers of secrets yet to be uncovered. Holmes walked beside me, his silence heavy with thought. Watson, he said at last, this workshop is the loom of our mystery. Every thread here, literal and figurative, leads to Eliza's death. The vial, the notebook, the tampered lock. They are but the first strands of a web. We must tread carefully, for the spider is watching. As we approached the church, where Margaret said we could find Clara and Thomas, I felt the weight of Threadhaven's secrets pressing closer, each step drawing us deeper into a pattern as delicate and dangerous as Eliza's lace. Chapter 4. The Silent Scream. The church at Threadhaven's heart loomed before us, its ancient stone walls weathered by centuries of wind and prayer. The spire cast a long shadow in the late morning light, like a needle poised to pierce the village's secrets. Margaret Thorne led Sherlock Holmes and me through the heavy oak doors into a cool, dimly lit interior, where the scent of old hymnals and beeswax candles hung heavy. The pews were empty, save for a young woman kneeling near the altar, her shoulders trembling with suppressed sobs. This, I presumed, was Clara, the youngest Thorne sister. Margaret approached her gently, whispering words of comfort, while Holmes' gaze roamed the church, noting every detail, the faded tapestries, the worn prayer cushions, the faint scratches on the stone floor near a side chapel. His restlessness was palpable, a coiled spring awaiting release. Miss Clara Thorne, Holmes called, his voice echoing softly in the vaulted space. The young woman started, turning to reveal a tear-streaked face framed by golden curls. She was younger than Margaret, perhaps 20, with an air of fragility that contrasted with the resolute set of her jaw. Yes, she said, rising unsteadily. You must be Mr. Holmes. Margaret told me you'd come for Eliza. Her voice broke on her sister's name, and she clutched a lace handkerchief, its delicate pattern catching the light from a stained glass window. Holmes inclined his head. My condolences, Miss Thorne. I understand your sister was found dead 2 days ago. Can you tell me precisely what you saw? Clara's eyes darted to Margaret, then back to Holmes. I found her. In the parlour. At dawn, she was at her lace pillow, as if she'd been working all night. Her hands were still on the bobbins, but she was gone, so still, Mr. Holmes, like a statue. I called her name, touched her shoulder, but she didn't move. I screamed for Margaret, and we sent for the doctor, but he said her heart had stopped. No reason. No sign of anything wrong. Holmes' eyes narrowed. Describe the scene exactly. Every detail, however trivial. Clara swallowed, twisting the handkerchief. She was sitting upright, her eyes open, staring at the lace. The room was cold, colder than it should have been, though the fire was still smouldering. Her teacup was on the table, half full, and there was a faint smell, like bitter almonds, but so faint I thought I imagined it. The lace on her pillow was strange, not like her usual work. It was uneven, rushed, with knots that didn't belong. Holmes' expression sharpened at the mention of the almond-like scent, but he said nothing, gesturing for her to continue. There was a spool of blue thread beside her, Clora added. She's been using it lately for that special commission. I thought it odd. She rarely used colours, said white lace was purest, and her notebook was open, but I didn't touch it. I was too frightened. Frightened of what? Holmes pressed, his voice low but insistent. Clara hesitated, glancing at Margaret. I don't know. It was just wrong. Eliza was never careless with her work, and the way she looked like she'd seen something terrible before she died. I can explain it, Mr. Holmes, but I felt watched, even though I was alone with her. Holmes nodded, his fingers brushing the notebook he taken from the workshop. And where was your cousin, Thomas, at this time? Thomas was at the Guildhall. Margaret interjected. He'd been there all night, balancing accounts. He came running when he heard my cries. As if summoned, a man appeared at the church's side entrance, a sturdy figure in his 30s, with a broad face and dark eyes shadowed by fatigue. His tweed coat was rumpled, and his hands bore ink stains, suggesting long hours with a ledger. "Margaret, Clara," he said, his voice gruff. "Who are these men?" "Thomas, this is Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson," Margaret said. "They are here to investigate Eliza Sitt's death." Thomas's expression hardened, though his eyes flicked nervously to Holmes. "Investigate?" The coroner said. It was her heart. "What sets to investigate?" Holmes stepped forward, his gaze piercing. "Much, Mr. Thorne. For instance, why a healthy woman of 32 should die without cause, her final work marred by deliberate errors, or why a faint scent of bitter almonds lingered in the room, a detail suggestive of something far from natural." Thomas paled slightly, but held his ground. "I don't know what you implying, sir. Eliza was family. We all loved her. If you looking for answers, talk to that merchant Harrow. He's been sniffing around our patterns for years, and Eliza turned him away again last week." "Indeed," Holmes said, his tone neutral. "And where were you, precisely?" "At dawn 2 days ago." "At the Guildhall, as Margaret said," Thomas replied, his jaw tightening. "I was working late. The Guild Sepp's finances are a mess. Eliza Sepp's commissions brought in money, but someone Sepp's been skimming funds. I was trying to trace it." Holmes' lister eyes gleamed with interest. "Skimming? A serious accusation. Any suspects?" Thomas hesitated, then shook his head. "Not yet, but I shall find them. Eliza deserved better than to have her legacy tarnished." Holmes turned to me, his voice low. "Watson, accompany me to the parlour where Eliza was found. I wish to see the scene myself." We left the church, Margaret and Clara promising to meet us at the cottage, while Thomas lingered, his gaze following us with a mix of defiance and unease. The walk back was silent, Holmes lost in thought, his fingers tracing the outline of the notebook in his pocket. I knew that look. His mind was weaving connections, each clue a thread in a pattern only he could yet see. The parlour was as Clara described, a small, cosy room with a lace pillow at its centre, the bobbins still tangled in their unnatural dance. Holmes knelt beside the table, his magnifying glass glinting as he examined the threads, the teacup, and the faint ash in the hearth. He paused at the cup, sniffing its contents, his brow furrowing. "Cyanide," he murmured. "Faint, but unmistakable. The almond-like scent Clara noted. It sets a hallmark, yet the cup shows no residue, and the tea appears untouched. The poison was not ingested here." "Then how?" I asked, baffled. "No marks, no struggle. How could she have been poisoned?" Holmes' eyes flicked to the lace pillow, then to the blue thread still wound around a bobbin. "The answer lies in the lace, Watson. These threads are not mere decoration. They are the instrument of death." He lifted a strand of the blue thread, holding it to the light. "Note its sheen, unusual, almost oily. I suspect it was treated with something deadly, absorbed through the skin as she worked." I stared, incredulous. "Poisoned thread? That sits diabolical." "Diabolical, but ingenious," Holmes said, a grim smile touching his lips. "The killer used Eliza Sipt's own craft against her, weaving death into her art. We must test this thread, Watson, and speak to those who had access to her materials." The web tightens, but the spider remains hidden. As he pocketed the thread, the room seemed to close in around us, the delicate lace casting shadows that whispered of betrayal. Whoever had crafted this murder was as skilled as Eliza herself, and I feared we had only begun to unravel the threads of their design. Chapter 5. Gathering Shadows. The afternoon sun dipped low over Threadhaven, casting elongated shadows that stretched across the village like accusing fingers. Sherlock Holmes and I left the parlour where Eliza Thorne had met her untimely end, the air still heavy with the ghostly echo of her silent scream. Holmes carried the sample of blue thread in a small envelope, his mind already dissecting its secrets, while I pondered the horror of a murder so subtle, so woven into the victim's daily life. We made our way to the Guildhall, a sturdy building adjacent to the workshop, where the lacemakers of Threadhaven gathered to discuss trade, share patterns, and settle disputes. It was here, Holmes believed, that the shadows of rivalry would first reveal themselves. The Guildhall was a relic of older times, its walls lined with shelves of ancient lace samples, yellowed with age and framed like sacred relics. A long oak table dominated the room, surrounded by chairs where the elders, mostly weathered men and women who had spent lifetimes bent over lace pillows, convened. As we entered, the murmur of voices ceased, and all eyes turned to us. Thomas Thorne stood at the head of the table, his face flushed from what appeared to have been a heated argument. Beside him sat an older man with a stern countenance, his beard streaked with grey, and a woman of middle age whose sharp eyes betrayed a keen intelligence. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," Thomas said, his tone guarded. "You sep come at an opportune time. The guild elders are here. Perhaps they can shed light on Eliza Fett's affairs." Holmes nodded curtly, his gaze sweeping the room. "Indeed, Mr. Thorne, I wish to speak with all who knew Eliza intimately. Family, apprentices, rivals. Her death was no accident, and the poison that claimed her was as delicate as the lace she wove." A gasp rippled through the room. The older man rose, his chair scraping against the stone floor. "Poison," the coroner said, "heart failure. Who are you to contradict him?" "I am Sherlock Holmes," my friend replied coolly, "and facts contradict him, not I." The blue thread on her final pillow was tainted, likely with a cyanide compound, absorbed through her skin as she worked. A method both ingenious and intimate, suggesting a killer familiar with her habits and materials. The woman at the table leaned forward, her lace-trimmed shawl slipping slightly. "I am Agnes Blackwood, Guild Treasure. Eliza was like a daughter to us all. If this is true, it sets monstrous. But who would do such a thing?" Holmes' sister eyes fixed on her. "That is what I intend to discover. Mrs. Blackwood, tell me, were there rivalries within the guild? Eliza Sist's patterns were renowned. Did they inspire envy?" Agnes hesitated, glancing at the others. "Lacemaking is competitive. Mr. Holmes, Threadhaven Sit's trade depends on unique designs. Eliza had a gift for innovation. Her work fetched high prices in London salons. Some resented that." "Such as?" Holmes pressed, his voice like a scalpel. Thomas interjected. "Lydia Gray, for one. Eliza's apprentice. She's ambitious, always prying into Eliza's sketches. And then there's Harrow. That London merchant has been hounding us for months, offering to buy exclusive rights to our patterns. Eliza refused him outright last week, said he'd cheapen our craft." The older man, who introduced himself as Elias Croft, Guild Master, nodded grimly. "Harrow's a snake. He's bought out other villages' guilds, turned their art into factory fodder. Eliza stood against him, rallied us to keep our traditions pure, but poison. That's not his style. He's all talk and coin." Holmes' sister lips twitched into a faint smile. "Styles can change, Mr. Croft. Where might I find this Harrow?" "He sits staying at the Weaver Sits Inn," Agnes said. "Came down from London 3 days ago, supposedly to negotiate. Hasn't sits left since Eliza Sit's death." We thanked them and departed. Holmes pausing at the door to examine a display of lace samples. "Note the variations, Watson," he murmured. "Each maker has a signature twist. Thorn Sid's is the thorn motif, recurring in her designs, a symbol perhaps of protection or warning." Our next stop was the Weaver Sits Inn, a cosy establishment at the village Sit's edge, its sign creaking in the breeze. The innkeeper, a portly man named Mr. Digby, greeted us with a wary nod. "Mr. Harrow, upstairs, room 3, been keeping to himself mostly, orders meals to his room." We ascended the narrow stairs, Holmes' footsteps silent as a cat's. At room 3, he knocked sharply. The door opened to reveal a man in his 40s, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his moustache waxed to precision. His eyes, shrewd and calculating, narrowed at the sight of us. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes," Harrow said, his surprise evident. "Your reputation travels fast. Come in, gentlemen. I assume this is about poor Eliza." The room was modest, cluttered with papers and lace samples spread across a table. Harrow gestured to chairs, but Holmes remained standing, his gaze roaming the clutter. "Indeed, Mr. Harrow, you were eager to acquire thorn patterns. Eliza refused you. A motive for murder, perhaps?" Harrow laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Murder? The woman died of heart failure. And even if not, I am a businessman, not an assassin. I offered her a fortune, enough to retire the guild Sit's debts. She was stubborn, clung to her Sitic integrity. Sittem foolish, but not worth killing over." Holmes picked up a lace sample from the table, examining it closely. "This is Eliza Sept's work. The thorn motif is unmistakable. How did you obtain it?" Harrow shrugged. "Bought it from a villager. Lydia Gray, the apprentice. She's got an eye for opportunity, that one. Said Eliza wouldn't miss it." "Interesting," Holmes said. pocketing the sample with Harrowsip's tacit permission. And where were you the night Eliza died? Here, in my room, Harrow replied smoothly. Digby can vouch. I had supper sent up, worked late on proposals, didn't leave until morning. We left Harrow with a warning to remain in Threadhaven, Holmes' sipped expression thoughtful as we descended. He sits hiding something, Watson, but not murder. His hands are clean, literally. No traces of dye or oil, and his alibi will hold. The killer is closer to home. Dusk was falling as we returned to the Thorn cottage where Margaret and Clara awaited us. Thomas joined soon after, his face etched with worry. Over a simple supper of bread and cheese, Holmes questioned them further. "Tell me of the family history," he said, his eyes on Clara. "Your parents, how did they die?" Clara paled. "A carriage accident. 5 years ago. They were returning from a lace fair in Dover. The road was slick with rain. The horses bolted. Eliza took over the workshop after that." "And the inheritance?" Holmes asked. "Was it divided equally?" Margaret nodded. "Yes, but Eliza managed the guild shares. She was the eldest, the most skilled. Thomas handles the accounts, but Eliza held the final say." Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "There were debts, as I said. Eliza Sett's commissions kept us afloat, but lately funds were missing. Small amounts, but they added up." Holmes' sick gaze sharpened. "Missing? Since when?" "About 6 months," Thomas admitted. "I thought it was errors at first, but patterns were disappearing too. Sketches from Eliza Sett's notebook. I suspected Lydia, or perhaps an outsider." As the evening deepened, shadows gathered in the corners of the room, mirroring the doubts in my mind. Holmes rose, excusing himself to examine the garden behind the cottage. I followed, finding him kneeling by a patch of herbs, his fingers sifting the soil. "Foxglove," he murmured, plucking a leaf. "A source of digitalsis, but not our poison. Yet look here, trampled earth near the window. Someone watched Eliza that night, Watson. The footprints are small, perhaps a woman sits us." Back inside, Holmes confronted the family. "One of you knows more than you said. The killer struck from within, poisoned thread, stolen patterns, missing funds. It points to betrayal." Clara burst into tears, Margaret comforting her, while Thomas stared defiantly. "You sat wrong, Holmes. We sat family." "Family," Holmes echoed, "is often the tightest knot in the web of deceit. Tomorrow we unravel it further." As we retired to our rooms at the inn, the village lay shrouded in darkness, its secrets gathering like storm clouds. I lay awake, the weight of suspicion pressing upon me, wondering which shadow hid the hand that had woven death into Eliza's delicate world. Chapter 6. Threads of Deception. The night in Threadhaven passed uneasily, with the wind whispering through the eaves of the Weaver's Inn like conspirators in hushed conference. I awoke to find Sherlock Holmes already at work, his chemical apparatus spread across the table in our shared room. The vial from Eliza's workshop bubbled gently over a spirit lamp, and the blue thread lay dissected under his magnifying glass. His face, illuminated by the flickering flame, bore the intensity of a man on the cusp of revelation. "Good morning, Watson," he said without looking up. "I trust you slept well. I, for one, have been unraveling the night away." I rubbed the sleep from my eyes, glancing at the apparatus. "What have you discovered, Holmes?" He straightened, gesturing to the thread. "This blue filament is no ordinary thread. It's linen, but treated with a compound that renders it absorbent, ideal for dyes or poisons. The residue I extracted matches prussic acid, a form of cyanide, diluted but potent enough to kill through prolonged contact. Eliza, working late, her hands chafed from constant bobbin handling, would have absorbed it unknowingly. Death would come slowly, mimicking heart failure. I shuddered at the cruelty. A devilish method. But who prepared the thread? Holmes' sick eyes gleamed. That is the question, Watson. The treatment requires knowledge of chemistry and access to her materials. We must return to the workshop and confront Lydia Gray. Her sale of lace to Harrow suggests opportunism, perhaps more. We breakfasted quickly and made our way to the workshop, where the lacemakers were already at their pillows, the rhythmic clack of bobbins filling the air like a coded message. Lydia was in Eliza's alcove, sorting threads with a furtive air. She started at our approach, dropping a spool that rolled under the table. "Miss Gray," Holmes said, his voice smooth but edged with steel, "we meet again. I have questions about your apprenticeship and your dealings with Mr. Harrow." Lydia Sett's face paled, her hands trembling as she retrieved the spool. "I understood know what you mean, sir." Holmes produced the lace sample from Harrow Sitt's room. "This is Eliza Fitt's work, sold by you. Why?" She bit her lip, glancing around as if fearing eavesdroppers. "I needed money. My family sips poor. Eliza paid little, said skill came first. Harrow offered a good price for a sample. It was just one piece, no harm done." "No harm," Holmes echoed, his tone sharpening. "Eliza is dead, poisoned by tainted thread. Thread you handled as her apprentice." Lydia Sepp's eyes widened in horror. "Poisoned? No, I sept never. I admired Eliza, learned from her. She was teaching me her special patterns, the ones with hidden meanings." "Hidden meanings?" I interjected, intrigued. Lydia nodded, lowering her voice. "Eliza wove codes into her lace, old family tradition, from when lacemakers smuggled messages during the wars. Symbols for words, knots for letters. She said her commission was for a client who wanted a message in threads. I helped dye the blue thread, but I swear it was just indigo and wax. Nothing poisonous." Holmes leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "Who supplied the dye?" "Thomas," Lydia admitted. "He handles supplies for the guild. Said he got a new batch from a London supplier, cheaper, better colour." Holmes exchanged a glance with me, the implication clear. "And the notebook? Did you ever see Eliza Sett sketches?" "Once," Lydia said. "She caught me looking, scolded me, but I saw a page with Theta Harrow Sitt crossed out and Theta Sitt circled, and a thorn pattern, repeated, like a warning." We left Lydia, her protests ringing in our ears, and sought Thomas at the Guildhall. He was poring over ledgers, his brow furrowed. "Mr. Holmes," he said wearily. "More questions?" "Indeed," Holmes replied. "About the blue dye. Lydia says you procured it. From whom?" Thomas rubbed his temples. "A supplier in London. Anonymous tip. Good price. I tested it myself. Seemed fine. If it sits poisoned, I sit been deceived." "Or deceptive," Holmes countered. "The missing funds. You manage the accounts. Perhaps you skimmed to pay debts, and Eliza discovered it." Thomas slammed the ledger shut, his face reddening. "Estee. It's absurd. I loved Eliza, like a sister. The missing money. I traced it to forgeries, patterns sold under false names, payments diverted. I suspected Harrow, buying secrets through a proxy." Holmes's expression remained inscrutable. Proof? Thomas opened a drawer, producing a crumpled letter. This came yesterday. Anonymous. Says say. The thorn pricks the hand that steals into lace scrap with Eliza Sitt's motif. Holmes examined the lace, his magnifying glass revealing faint ink marks. A cipher, he murmured. The knots spell, "D beware the weaver within." Sepp and Eliza Sepp's hand, no doubt. She knew of the deception and wove a warning. As we departed, Holmes paused outside, lighting his pipe. Threads of deception, Watson. Thomas points to Harrow, Lydia to Thomas, and the lace to an insider. We must decipher the notebook fully. Back at the inn, Holmes spread Eliza Sepp's notebook on the table, his fingers tracing the sketches. See here, the thorn motif recurs, intertwined with symbols, a coin for debt, a mask for betrayal, and this sequence, knots forming letters, F-O-R-G-E-D. Forged, I said. The scandal you mentioned in London, the vanished lacemaker in 78. Holmes nodded. The Thorn family has roots in that. Eliza Sepp's father was accused of forging lace patterns, stealing designs from rivals. He fled, but perhaps left a legacy, an inheritance hidden in code. A knock interrupted us. Margaret, her face anxious. Mr. Holmes, Clara's, it's missing. She went for a walk by the river, and hasn't returned. I fear something Sepp's happened. We hurried to the riverbank. The Medway sips waters, murmuring secrets as they flowed. Holmes scanned the ground, his eyes alight. Footprints, 2 sets. Clara sips small boots, and larger ones, a man sips. They lead into the copse. We followed the trail, branches snagging our coats, until a cry pierced the air. Bursting into a clearing, we found Clara struggling against a cloaked figure. Holmes lunged, his stick raised, but the assailant shoved Clara aside and fled into the undergrowth. I rushed to Clara, who was shaken but unharmed. He grabbed me, she gasped, said, "The tartans are mine now, Thid," and demanded Eliza Sitt's notebook. Holmes examined the ground where the figure had stood. Mud on his boots, London clay, not local soil. And this, he held up a button, engraved with a merchant Sitt's insignia. Harrow Sitt's, no doubt. We escorted Clara home. Holmes silent but resolute. Deception deepens, Watson. Harrow attacks, but why now? He seeks the notebook, the key to the hidden inheritance. Eliza wove its location into her lace, a fortune in stolen designs, or perhaps gold from the old scandal. As evening fell, the village seemed entangled in lies, each suspect a knot in the growing web. Holmes paced our room, piecing the puzzle. Tomorrow we confront Harrow again. But mark my words, the true deceiver is closer than we think. I retired with unease, the threads of the case twisting in my mind like Eliza's fatal lace. Chapter 7. The Midnight Visitor. The moon hung low over Threadhaven, its pale light filtering through the curtains of our room at the Weaver's Inn, casting ethereal patterns on the floor that reminded me unnervingly of lace. Sherlock Holmes sat by the window, his pipe glowing intermittently as he stared into the night, his mind a whirlwind of deductions I could only guess at. The events of the day, the attack on Clara, the revelations in Eliza's notebook, and the mounting suspicions among the suspects had left me restless, my revolver close at hand beneath my pillow. Holmes, however, seemed invigorated by the complexity, his sharp features etched with concentration. "Watson," he said suddenly, his voice a low murmur, "do you hear that?" I strained my ears, catching a faint rustle outside, like footsteps on gravel. Before I could respond, Holmes was on his feet, motioning for silence. He crept to the door, his movements silent and precise, and cracked it open just enough to peer into the corridor. The inn was quiet, its other guests long abed, but the sound persisted, now a soft creak from the stairs below. "Someone is abroad," Holmes whispered, retrieving his stick from the corner. "Arm yourself, Watson. We may have a midnight visitor." I slipped my revolver into my pocket and followed him down the stairs, our footsteps muffled on the worn carpet. The common room was dark, save for the dying embers in the hearth, but a shadow flitted past the window, heading toward the rear of the inn. Holmes nodded toward the back door, and we slipped outside into the chill night air. The village lay shrouded in mist, the river's murmur a distant lullaby. Ahead, a cloaked figure moved stealthily toward the Thorn cottage, hugging the shadows of the hedgerows. Holmes' eyes gleamed with the thrill of the hunt. "After him, Watson, but quietly. We must see his intent before we strike." We pursued at a distance, the figure oblivious to our presence. He paused at the cottage gate, glancing around, then scaled the low wall with surprising agility. Holmes quickened his pace, and we reached the wall just as the intruder approached the parlour window, the very room where Eliza had died. The figure produced a tool, a jimmy perhaps, and began prying at the window latch. Holmes sprang forward like a panther, his stick raised. "Halt!" he commanded, his voice cutting through the night. The intruder whirled, dropping the tool, and bolted toward the garden. Holmes gave chase, with me close behind, my heart pounding. The pursuit led through the herb patch we had examined earlier, then into the adjacent copse, branches whipping at our faces. The figure was nimble, dodging trees with ease, but Holmes was relentless, his long strides closing the gap. I heard a grunt as Holmes tackled the intruder to the ground, the two rolling in the underbrush. I arrived, moments later, revolver drawn. "Don't move," I barked. The struggle ceased, and Holmes hauled the figure to his feet, pulling back the cloak's hood. To our surprise, it revealed not Harrow or Thomas, but Lydia Gray, her face smudged with dirt and her eyes wide with fear. "Miss Gray," Holmes exclaimed, his grip firm on her arm, "explain yourself. Breaking into the Thorn cottage at midnight. What secrets do you seek?" Lydia struggled briefly, then sagged in defeat. "Please, Mr. Holmes, I didn't kill Eliza. I swear it. But I need her notebook. There's something in it. Something she promised me." Holmes' eyes narrowed. "Promised you? Speak plainly, woman. Your actions condemn you." We escorted her back to the inn, where Mr. Digby, roused by the commotion, provided a private parlour and hot tea. Lydia sat trembling, her hands wrapped around the cup. "Eliza, she wasn't just my master. She was my friend. She knew my family's troubles, debts from my father's failed ventures. She said she'd help, that there was a way to secure my future." "And the notebook?" I prompted. Lydia glanced at Holmes. "It holds the key to a hidden fortune. Eliza told me bits. Her father, the one who vanished in the '78 scandal, didn't flee empty-handed. He hid valuables, gold, jewels, and rare lace patterns worth a king's ransom. He encoded the location in a family heirloom, a lace doily passed to Eliza. But she reworked it, hid the code in her sketches." Holmes leaned forward, his interest piqued. "And you believed breaking in would yield it?" "I panicked," Lydia admitted. "After Clara's attack, I thought someone else knew. Harrow's been asking questions, offering me money for information. And Thomas, he's been acting strange, poring over old accounts. I thought, if I found the notebook, I could claim what Eliza promised, a share to pay my debts. Holmes produced the notebook from his coat, laying it on the table. This notebook, taken from the workshop. Tell me, what do you see in its pages that I have missed? Lydia's eyes lit with recognition. She flipped to a page with a complex thorn pattern. Here, the thorns aren't just decoration. They're a map. See the knots? They correspond to landmarks in Threadhaven, the church spire, the river bend, the old oak in the copse. And this symbol, a crossed bobbin, marks the spot under the church altar, perhaps, or in the guild vault. Holmes studied the page, his fingers tracing the lines. Astute, Miss Grey. But why not tell us earlier? I was afraid, she whispered. If the fortune set's real, it sets motive for murder. Eliza was close to finding it. She said the blue thread was a test, dyed to reveal hidden ink in the old lace, but someone stopped her. The poison, I said. You helped dye the thread. Did you tamper with it? No, Lydia protested. Thomas brought the dye, but I saw him arguing with Eliza the day before she died, about money, the missing funds. He accused her of hiding something. Holmes nodded thoughtfully. Your revelations illuminate much, Miss Grey, but you are not absolved. Remain here. Digby will watch you. Watson, we must rouse the thorns. This midnight escapade has unravelled new threads. We left Lydia under the innkeeper Set's watchful eye and hastened to the cottage. Margaret answered our knock, her face pale in the lantern light. Mr. Holmes, what's happened? Intrigue, Miss Thorne. Holmes replied. Gather your family. Lydia Grey has confessed to seeking Eliza Sepp's notebook for a hidden fortune tied to your father Sepp's scandal. Clara and Thomas soon joined us in the parlour, the air thick with tension. Thomas's eyes widened at the mention of the fortune. The old tales Father Sist's hoard, the thought it myth, stories to scare rivals. Not myth, Holmes said, displaying the notebook. Eliza decoded it. The map points to a location in the village. We must search at dawn, but first confessions. Someone poisoned the thread to silence her discovery. Clara gasped. The fortune, that's why she was agitated. She mentioned Father Sixel's legacy, said it would save us all. Thomas paced, his face shadowed. If it sits real, it explains the forgeries. Someone forging patterns to fund a search or to cover tracks. As the clock struck 2, Holmes turned to me. Watson, guard the notebook. Tomorrow we follow the map, but beware, the visitor tonight may not be the last. The killer lurks, drawn by the scent of gold. I nodded, the weight of the case pressing heavier. As we returned to the inn, the moon dipped below the horizon, leaving Threadhaven in darkness, a village woven with deception, where every shadow hid a secret from Eliza's past. Chapter 8. Watson's Peril. Dawn broke over Threadhaven with a reluctant glow, the mist rising from the River Medway like ghosts fleeing the light. Sherlock Holmes and I had scarcely slept after the midnight confrontation with Lydia Grey, our minds abuzz with the revelations of the hidden fortune and the encoded map in Eliza's notebook. Holmes paced the room at the Weaver's Inn, his pipe trailing smoke as he deciphered the final symbols in the sketches, his long fingers dancing over the pages like a conductor leading an invisible orchestra. Watson, he said at last, snapping the notebook shut, the map is clear. The thorns represent the village landmarks, the church as the central spike, the river as the winding stem, and the old oak in the copse as the blooming flower. The crossed bobbin marks the burial spot beneath the church's side chapel where the Thorn family crypt lies. Eliza's father hid his hoard there, accessible only to those who know the code. I nodded, the thrill of discovery mingling with apprehension. 'Tis then. We search the crypt today. But Holmes the killer knows of this too. Lydia Sepp's intrusion, Clara Sepp's attack. They set a desperate to claim it first. Precisely, Holmes replied, his eyes alight. We must gather the suspects. Margaret, Clara, Thomas, Lydia, and Harrow. Under the guise of a guild meeting, we'll confront them at the church. But first, Watson, I need you to pursue a lead. Go to the apothecary in the neighbouring village, Maidstone, a short ride away. Inquire about purchases of cyanide or prussic acid in recent months. The poison's source may reveal the killer. I agreed, though a twinge of unease stirred within me. Holmes often sent me on such errands, but in this tangled web, separation felt risky. Nonetheless, I saddled a horse from the inn stable and set off along the winding road to Maidstone, the morning sun warming my back as Threadhaven receded behind me. The ride was uneventful. At first, the countryside unfolding in gentle hills and hedgerows buzzing with bees. But as I neared a dense wood midway, a sense of being watched prickled my skin. I glanced back, seeing nothing but shadows dancing in the breeze. Shaking off the paranoia, I urged the horse onward. It happened swiftly. A rustle in the underbrush, then a figure bursting from the trees, cloaked and masked, wielding a stout club. The horse reared in fright, throwing me to the ground with a jarring thud that knocked the wind from my lungs. I scrambled for my revolver, but the assailant was upon me, the club swinging down with vicious force. I rolled aside, the blow glancing off my shoulder in a burst of pain. "Who are you?" I gasped, drawing my weapon. The figure didn't answer, lunging again, their movements frantic, but determined. We grappled in the dirt, my military training serving me well as I landed a solid punch to their midsection. They grunted, a muffled, indistinct sound, and staggered back, but not before snatching Eliza's notebook from my coat pocket, which I had foolishly carried for safekeeping. "No!" I shouted, firing a warning shot into the air. The assailant fled into the woods, the notebook clutched tightly. I gave chase, branches tearing at my clothes, my shoulder throbbing with each step. The pursuit led deeper into the thicket, where the light dimmed under the canopy, and the ground grew treacherous with roots and mud. I caught glimpses of the figure ahead, their cloak snagging on thorns, but they were agile, weaving through the trees like a shadow. My breath came in ragged gasps, the old Afghan wound in my leg protesting the exertion. Suddenly, a root caught my foot, sending me sprawling into a clearing. As I rose, the assailant was waiting, club raised for a final blow. In that moment, a shot rang out, not mine, but from behind. The figure yelped, dropping the club and clutching their arm, blood seeping through the cloak. They turned and bolted, vanishing into the foliage. I whirled to see Holmes emerging from the trees, his revolver smoking, his face a mask of concern and triumph. "Watson, are you injured?" "Holmes!" I exclaimed, relief flooding me. "How did you—" "I followed at a distance," he admitted, helping me to my feet. "I suspected the killer might target you, knowing you carried the notebook. It was a calculated risk, but necessary to draw them out." I winced, rubbing my shoulder. They got the notebook. All that work lost. Holmes smiled faintly, producing the leather-bound volume from his own pocket. A decoy, Watson. The real one is safe at the inn. This was a blank duplicate, laced with a harmless powder that will mark the thief's hands, a fluorescent compound visible under ultraviolet light, but unnoticeable otherwise. I chuckled despite the pain, my loyalty to Holmes reaffirmed in that instant. You think of everything. But who was it? I couldn't see their face. We shall know soon, Holmes said, examining the ground. The footprints match those from Clara Seck's attack. London boots, but scuffed. And this, he picked up a torn scrap of fabric from the cloak, embroidered with a faint guild emblem. An insider, masquerading as an outsider. We returned to Threadhaven, where Holmes insisted I rest at the inn while he arranged the guild meeting. But my peril had only heightened my resolve. I bandaged my shoulder and joined him at the church, where the suspects assembled in the nave, their faces a tapestry of anxiety and suspicion. Margaret and Clara sat together, whispering. Thomas paced near the altar. Lydia fidgeted with her hands, glancing nervously at the door, and Harrow lounged in a pew, his moustache twitching with impatience. Holmes stood before them, the decoy notebook in hand, his presence commanding the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice echoing off the stone walls, "Eliza Thorne Sept's murder was no random act. It was born of greed, tied to the hidden fortune her father concealed. The map in this notebook leads to it. Here, in the crypt below." A murmur rippled through the group. Harrow leaned forward. "Fortune, prove it, Holmes." Holmes opened the decoy, displaying blank pages to all but me. "The code is subtle, but irrefutable, yet one among you sought to steal it today, attacking Dr. Watson on the road." Gasps filled the air. Thomas stepped forward. "Who? Name them." Holmes produced a small ultraviolet lamp from his valise, a device of his own invention, and shone it on each suspect's hands in turn. Margaret's were clean, Clara's trembled but unmarked, Thomas's bore ink stains but no glow, Lydia's were calloused unlit, but when the light hit Harrow's, a faint green fluorescence shimmered on his palms. "You," Holmes declared. "The powder from the decoy marks you as the thief, and Clara sits assailant." Harrow snarled, rising. "Ridiculous. Been here all morning." "A lie," Holmes countered. "Digby saw you leave at dawn, on horseback. You followed Watson, intent on seizing the map. But why? Not for the fortune alone. You set wealthy. No. To cover your role in the poison." Harrow laughed bitterly. "Prove it. The button from Clarisset's attack, your insignia, and the die you supplied it to Thomas anonymously, laced with cyanide. You sought to eliminate Eliza, who discovered your forgery scheme, selling Thorne patterns under your name, diverting funds to yourself." The group stared in shock. Lydia spoke up. "But Harrow didn't have access to the thread." "He didn't need to," Holmes said. "He bribed an insider, someone who dyed the thread, knowing Eliza would use it." All eyes turned inward, the air thick with betrayal. Holmes' protective glance toward me reminded me of our bond, tested but unbreakable in this peril. As the confrontation escalated, I knew the true culprit's reveal was near, but for now, my narrow escape had tightened the noose around the web of deceit. Chapter 9. The Pattern Unravels. The air in Threadhaven's ancient church was thick with tension, the stained glass windows casting fractured colours across the faces of the gathered suspects. Margaret, Clara, Thomas, Lydia, and Harrow. Sherlock Holmes stood at the centre of the nave, his ultraviolet lamp still glowing faintly, its light exposing the fluorescent powder on Harrow's hands as evidence of his attempted theft of the decoy notebook. Yet his accusation that Harrow orchestrated the poisoned thread had stirred a storm of denials and accusations, each voice weaving a new thread of doubt into the tangled web of Eliza Thorne's murder. Harrow, his moustache quivering with indignation, jabbed a finger at Holmes. "This is preposterous, Holmes. A speck of powder proves nothing. I am a merchant, not a chemist. If the dye was poisoned, look to Thomas. He handled the Guildship supplies." Thomas bristled, his ink-stained hands clenching into fists. "You dare accuse me? I trusted your supplier, Harrow. You sent that dye, knowing it would reach Eliza. You wanted her patterns, her secrets." "Enough." Holmes' voice cut through the clamour like a blade, commanding silence. "The truth lies not in your words, but in the evidence. The notebook, Eliza Sett's true legacy, has revealed its secrets to me. Watson, the lamp, if you please." I handed him the ultraviolet lamp, my shoulder still aching from the previous day's attack, but my trust in Holmes unwavering. He opened the real notebook, taken from its hiding place at the inn, and held it under the light. The pages, innocuous in daylight, glowed with hidden ink, lines and symbols invisible to the untrained eye. The thorn patterns shimmered, their knots forming a sequence of letters and numbers. "Eliza's genius," Holmes said, his voice low with admiration, "was to encode her father's secret in the lace itself. The thorns are a map, as Miss Grey suggested, but also a cipher. These symbols spell out a location, the family crypt beneath this very church, and a warning the weaver betrays. But there's more. The final page in ultraviolet light reveals a ledger of forged transactions." He turned the notebook to show a glowing list, dates, amounts, and initials, E.T., T.T., and an unfamiliar set. J.B., these record payments diverted from the guild, disguised as sales of lace patterns. Eliza discovered the forgery, traced it to her father's old scandal, and wove the evidence into her work to expose the culprit. Margaret gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Father's sixth scandal, the forged patterns in 678. He swore he was innocent, but fled to protect us. Did Eliza find proof? Holmes nodded. She did. And her discovery cost her life. The forger, fearing exposure, poisoned her thread, but the cipher names them. He pointed to the initials J.B., not Harrow nor Thomas, but someone close, someone who knew Eliza Sipp's habits, her workshop, her trust. Clara Sitt's voice trembled. "J.B., but who?" "Jonathan Blackwood," Holmes declared, turning to the guild treasurer, Agnes Blackwood, who had entered quietly during the confrontation. Her sharp eyes widened, but she remained composed, clutching her lace-trimmed shawl. "My husband," Agnes said, her voice steady but strained. "Jonathan died 2 years ago, Mr. Holmes. A fever took him. You such mistaken." "Am I?" Holmes countered, producing the scrap of lace from the anonymous letter Thomas had received. "This bears the thorn motif, but also a hidden mark, J.B.'s signature knot, taught to Eliza in her youth. Your husband was her mentor, was he not? He trained her in the guild's secret codes. You entave 2 secret codes." Agnes nodded slowly. "He did, but he sits gone. How could he?" "He's not gone," Holmes interrupted, his gaze piercing. "Jonathan Blackwood faked his death, just as Eliza's father did in 78. The scandal linked them partners in forging patterns, stealing designs from rival guilds. When Eliza's father fled, Blackwood stayed, biding his time, managing the guild's accounts through you, Agnes. But Eliza's discovery threatened to expose him. He returned, in secret, to silence her. The room fell silent, the weight of the accusation settling like dust. Agnes Stett's composure cracked, her hands trembling. "That's Stett's impossible. I buried him." Holmes stepped closer, his voice relentless. "Did you see the body? Or was the coffin sealed, the fever a convenient excuse? The footprints in the garden, the attack on Clara, the theft of the notebook, all bear the mark of a man skilled in deception, with access to guild resources. The cyanide came from Maidstone's apothecary, purchased under a false name 3 weeks ago. J.B. I recalled my perilous journey, the cloaked figure who had nearly bested me. "Holmes," I said. The attacker was agile, strong. Could it truly be a man presumed dead? "Indeed, Watson," Holmes replied. "Blackwood's death allowed him to operate in shadows, forging patterns and siphoning funds. Eliza's commission, the blue thread, was a test to reveal his hidden ink, exposing his treachery. He poisoned the thread to stop her, using his old knowledge of her craft." Lydia, pale and shaken, spoke up. "But why involve me? I dyed the thread, yes, but Thomas brought the supplies." Holmes turned to Thomas, who looked stricken. "You were unwitting, Mr. Thorne. Blackwood used you, knowing your trust in suppliers. The dye was his, delivered through Harrow Sip's network, a clever misdirection." Harrow scoffed. "I fin no murderer's steps, pawn, Holmes." "No," Holmes agreed, "but a profiteer. You bought stolen patterns, unaware of their source, hoping to dominate the lace trade. Your greed made you a tool." Agnes sank into a pew, her face ashen. "If Jonathan sits alive, where is he?" Holmes gestured to the side chapel. "The crypt, Mrs. Blackwood, the fortune, gold and patterns, hidden by your husband and Eliza Sips's father, lies there. He Sip's been watching, waiting to claim it before we do." We moved as a group to the chapel, its iron gate creaking as Thomas pushed it open. Stone steps descended into darkness, the air cold and musty. Holmes lit a lantern, its glow illuminating a row of stone sarcophagi, each carved with the Thorne family crest. At the far end, a loose slab in the floor caught his eye. "Here," he said, kneeling. With my help, he lifted the slab, revealing a small cavity. Inside lay a wooden box, inlaid with a lace-like pattern. Holmes opened it, revealing gold coins, a bundle of ancient lace, and a ledger proof of the '78 scandal, naming Jonathan Blackwood and Eliza's father as partners. A faint scrape echoed behind us. Holmes whirled, lantern raised, as a cloaked figure emerged from the shadows. A man gaunt but wiry, his face partially hidden by a scarf. "You're too late, Holmes," he rasped, his voice confirming Agnes' worst fear. "Jonathan!" she cried, staggering back. He lunged for the box, but Holmes was faster, his stick striking the man's wrist. Blackwood stumbled, cursing, and I tackled him, pinning him to the cold stone. Thomas and Harrow helped restrain him, while Clara and Lydia clung to Margaret, sobbing. "The pattern unravels, Blackwood," Holmes said coldly. "Your poison, your forgeries, all exposed by Eliza Sip's lace." As we bound Blackwood's hands, the crypt seemed to exhale, its secrets laid bare. But I sensed Holmes' unease. His eyes lingered on the box, as if a final thread remained unpulled in this intricate design. Chapter 10. Confronting the weavers. The crypt beneath Threadhaven's church was a vault of shadows, its cold stone walls echoing with the weight of Jonathan Blackwood's unmasking. Bound and defiant, he glared at Sherlock Holmes, his gaunt face twisted with a mix of rage and resignation. The wooden box containing the Thorne family's hidden fortune, gold coins, rare lace patterns, and the damning ledger of the 1878 scandal lay open on the crypt floor, its contents glinting in the lantern's flickering light. Margaret, Clara, Thomas, Lydia, and Harrow stood in a tense semicircle, their faces reflecting shock, betrayal, and relief in varying measures. Agnes Blackwood, trembling beside her resurrected husband, seemed on the verge of collapse, her loyalty torn by his deceit. Holmes, his silhouette sharp against the crypt's gloom, held the ledger aloft. "This," he said, his voice resonant in the confined space, "is the thread that binds this tragedy. Jonathan Blackwood and Eliza Thorne's father, partners in forgery, amassed a fortune by stealing rival patterns and selling them as their own. When the scandal broke, Blackwood faked his death to escape justice, while Eliza's father fled, leaving this hoard encoded in lace. Eliza, in her brilliance, uncovered the truth and wove it into her final work, a map to this crypt, a ledger of crimes, and a warning of betrayal." Jonathan sneered, his scarf now fallen, to reveal a face hardened by years of secrecy. "Eliza was a fool to meddle. She thought she could expose me, claim the fortune for herself. I had to stop her. By poisoning her thread," Holmes said, his tone icy. "You used your knowledge of the Guild Seps codes and Eliza Seps' habits, lacing her blue thread with prussic acid, knowing her hands would absorb it as she worked." Agnes gasped, clutching the crypt wall. "Jonathan, you swore you loved her like a daughter." "Lies," he spat. "She was a threat. The fortune was mine. My right after years in hiding, scraping by while she profited from our work." Holmes turned to the others. But Blackwood did not act alone. The die required access to the workshop, a confederate within the guild. Who among you aided him? The accusation hung heavy, eyes darting between suspects. Old Thomas stepped forward, his face flushed. "Not me, Holmes. I handled the die. Yes, but I trusted the supplier. Blackwood tricked me." Lydia Sepst's voice trembled. "I dyed the thread, but I swear I didn't yet know it was poisoned. Eliza trusted me. She was teaching me the codes." Clara, clinging to Margaret, whispered, "It can sit be one of us. We loved her." Harrow, leaning against a sarcophagus, scoffed. "Don set. Look at me. I bought patterns, sure, but I stun no killer. Blackwood sits your man." Holmes' gaze settled on Agnes, who shrank under its weight. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said softly, "you mourned a husband you believed dead. Yet your hands, when I examined them under the ultraviolet light, bore faint traces of the same powder as Harrow's, not enough to mark you as the thief, but enough to suggest contact with the decoy notebook. You handled it, perhaps unknowingly, when it was in Blackwood's possession." Agnes shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I found papers in Jonathan Sep's old desk last month, hidden in a false bottom. I thought they were guild records. I gave them to him when he appeared, alive after all this time. He said he needed them to protect us." "You gave him the notebook?" I asked, incredulous. "Not the real one," Holmes clarified. "A draft perhaps, or sketches, Eliza discarded. Enough for Blackwood to know she was close to the truth." He turned to Jonathan. "You used your wife's trust to access the workshop to plant the poison." But Eliza's cipher was too complex, even for you. You needed the final notebook, which is why you attacked Clara and Watson. Jonathan's eyes flickered with defiance, but he said nothing. Holmes continued, addressing the group. The ledger names Blackwood and Eliza's father, but also hints at a third party, initials obscured in the cipher. JB is clear, but another set, faint and overwritten, suggests complicity within the family. Margaret stiffened. You can stit mean one of us. From victims. Are you? Holmes asked, his voice cutting. Eliza Sept's fortune was to be shared among you, yet the Guild Sept's debts grew. Thomas, you reported missing funds. Were they truly stolen or diverted to cover your own tracks? Thomas paled. I told you, I suspected forgeries. I was investigating, not stealing. Holmes produced the anonymous letter Thomas had shown us, its lace scrap glowing faintly under the lamp. This warning, the thorn pricks the hand that steals, was not from Eliza, but from you, Thomas. You wrote it to deflect suspicion, knowing Blackwood was alive. You saw him, didn't you? In the village, before Eliza's death. Thomas staggered back, his face ashen. I saw a man in a cloak near the guild hall. Weeks ago, I thought it was a vagrant. But his voice, it was familiar. I didn't steal anyone, not even Eliza. I was afraid. Afraid of what? I demanded, my hand straying to my revolver, the memory of my own attack still fresh. Of the past, Thomas admitted. Father Sixt's scandal ruined us. I thought, if it resurfaced, the guild would collapse. I kept quiet, hoping it would pass. Holmes nodded, his expression grim. Your silence enabled Blackwood, but you are not the third party. The Cipher Sixth's final clue points elsewhere to someone who knew the Workshop Sixth's secrets, who had access to the die before Thomas. All eyes turned to Lydia, who shrank back, shaking her head. Not me. I told you, I only followed Eliza Sext's instructions. Holmes stepped closer, his voice low. Yet you sold her patterns to Harrow. You knew of the fortune, sought the notebook yourself. Your ambition outstripped your loyalty. Lydia sobbed, collapsing onto a stone bench. I wanted to help my family, not hurt Eliza. I didn't know the die was poisoned. Holmes' eyes softened, but only slightly. I believe you, Miss Grey, but someone did. The third party remains hidden, their initials obscured in the lace. We must search the workshop again, every vial, every thread. We escorted Blackwood to the village constable, a burly man named Perkins, who locked him in the guild hall's cellar pending a magistrate's arrival. The others dispersed, shaken but cooperative, agreeing to meet us at the workshop. As we walked through Threadhaven's quiet streets, the weight of the case pressed upon me. Holmes, however, seemed invigorated, his mind weaving the final threads. Watson, he said, pausing by the river, the cipher is nearly complete, but one knot remains. Third party. Someone who knew Blackwood Set's plan, who aided him not for greed, but for revenge. The lace holds the final clue, hidden in its delicate weave. At the workshop, Holmes examined every spool, every vial, under the ultraviolet lamp. In a corner, half hidden behind a curtain, he found a small bottle, unlabeled, its contents a faint blue. This, he said, sniffing cautiously, is the source. Not just cyanide, but a compound mixed with indigo to mask its scent. Only a skilled lacemaker could prepare it. As he spoke, a shadow moved outside the window, a flicker, then gone. Holmes' eyes narrowed. The weaver is near, Watson. The trap is set, and they will come. I gripped my revolver, the air thick with impending revelation. The pattern was unraveling, but the final thread, vengeance, promised a confrontation as delicate and deadly as Eliza's lace. Chapter 11. The Delicate Trap. The workshop of Thorne and Daughters stood silent under the midday sun, its windows reflecting the pale light of Threadhaven's ever-present mist. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of linen and wax, but to me, Dr. John Watson, it carried the heavier weight of anticipation. Sherlock Holmes had spent the morning arranging his trap, a scheme as intricate as the lace patterns that surrounded us. Jonathan Blackwood was locked away, his role as the mastermind behind Eliza Thorne's murder confirmed, yet Holmes insisted the case was not fully unravelled. A third party, a silent partner in the poisoning, remained at large, their identity hidden in the delicate weave of Eliza's final work. Holmes stood by Eliza's lace pillow, the blue thread, now known to be laced with cyanide, carefully sealed in a glass vial. He had summoned Margaret, Clara, Thomas, Lydia, and Harrow to the workshop under the pretense of revealing the fortune's final resting place. The real notebook, its glowing ciphers decoded, lay hidden in his valise, replaced by a second decoy, a replica laced with a harmless adhesive that would stick to the hands of anyone who touched it, marking the guilty. "Watson," Holmes murmured, adjusting a magnifying glass on the table. "The killer Sip's accomplice is among us, driven by vengeance, not greed." Eliza Sip's lace named Blackwood, but also hinted at a deeper betrayal, a family wound. "Our trap will draw them out." I nodded, my revolver discreetly tucked in my coat, my shoulder still tender from the attack on the road, and the bait. Holmes gestured to a small lace doily, freshly woven by his own hand, a remarkable imitation of Eliza's thorn motif, laced with the adhesive. "This," he said, "is the key. I've spread word through the innkeeper that it holds the final clue to the fortune overlooked in the crypt. The accomplice, desperate to destroy evidence of their complicity, will attempt to take it." The suspects arrived one by one, their faces a mix of apprehension and curiosity. Margaret and Clara clung together, their eyes red from sleepless nights. Thomas, his hands still stained with ink, hovered near the door, his gaze darting nervously. Lydia, subdued since her midnight escapade, clutched a bundle of threads as if they were a shield. Harrow, ever the opportunist, leaned against a table, his moustache twitching with impatience. Holmes addressed them, his voice calm but commanding. "Ladies and gentlemen, Jonathan Blackwood's confession has illuminated much, but not all. Eliza's murder required an insider, someone who prepared the poison dye, who knew her habits intimately. This doily," he held up the bait, "was found in the crypt, overlooked in our haste. Its pattern completes the cipher, naming the accomplice." A murmur rippled through the group. Harrow scoffed. "Another trick, Holmes. You Sips already pinned it on Blackwood." "Not a trick," Holmes replied, setting the doily on the lace pillow. "The truth lies in the threads. Examine it, if you wish." He stepped back, his eyes sharp as a hawk's, watching every movement, and Margaret hesitated, then approached, her fingers hovering, but not touching. Clara shook her head, staying close to her sister. Thomas glanced at the doily, but remained rooted, his jaw tight. Lydia, trembling, reached out, then pulled back, her face pale. Harrow, however, strode forward, his hand brushing the doily as if to inspect it. "Child's play," he muttered, but his fingers lingered, the adhesive catching subtly on his skin. Holmes's voice cut through the silence. "Careful, Mr. Harrow. The lace clings to those with secrets." Harrow yanked his hand back, but it was too late. Holmes produced a small bottle of solvent, spraying it lightly on Harrow's hands. A faint stickiness glistened, marking him. "The adhesive," Holmes said, "reveals your interest, but you are not the accomplice. Your greed is too blunt. Step aside." Harrow cursed, retreating as Holmes' gaze shifted to the others. The tension was palpable. The workshop's quiet hum of bobbins now a distant memory. Then, a sudden movement. Clara, breaking from Margaret's side, lunged for the doily, snatching it with a cry. "No," she screamed, tearing at the lace. "It's lies, all lies." Margaret gasped, reaching for her sister, but Holmes was faster. Seizing Clara Sept's wrist, the doily fell, its adhesive coating her hands. Holmes sprayed the solvent, confirming the stickiness. "Miss Clara Thorne," he said, his voice cold, "your desperation betrays you." Clara collapsed, sobbing, as Margaret stared in horror. "Clara, no! It can sit be." Holmes knelt beside her, his tone softening but unrelenting. "You aided Blackwood, didn't set you. Not for gold, but for revenge. Eliza Sept's discovery of the fortune and the scandal threatened to ruin the family name. You blamed her for digging up the past." Clara Sept's sobs grew ragged. She was going to tell everyone. Father Sept's shame. Our shame. He wasn't a thief. He was protecting us. Eliza wanted to sell the patterns, give the gold away to clear his name. I couldn't let her destroy us. "You knew Blackwood was alive," Holmes continued. "You saw him as Thomas did, but you contacted him. You prepared the dye mixed with cyanide he supplied and ensured it reached Eliza Sept's thread." Clara nodded, her voice barely audible. "He promised to take the fortune and leave. I just wanted it buried again. I didn't mean for her to die. Not like that." Margaret sank to her knees, clutching Clara. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I was ashamed," Clara whispered. "Eliza was so perfect, so strong. I hated her for it." Thomas, his face ashen, turned away, while Lydia wept silently. Harrow watched, his expression unreadable, perhaps relieved to be spared the noose. I stood by Holmes, my heart heavy with the tragedy of a family torn apart by its own secrets. Holmes addressed the group. "The trap is sprung. Tia stis. Confession completes the pattern. Blackwood orchestrated the murder, but Clara Stis' vengeance enabled it. The lace Eliza Stis masterpiece exposed them both." As we handed Clara to Constable Perkins, who had arrived with the magistrate, the workshop seemed to exhale, its delicate threads no longer hiding death, but revealing truth. Holmes gathered the real notebook, its ciphers now fully decoded, and turned to me. "Watson," he said quietly, "the trap was delicate, but the truth is stark. One thread remains. The method Spet's final proof. We must test the dyed Spet's composition to confirm Clara Spet's role." I nodded, my loyalty to Holmes steadfast, despite the sorrow of the moment. The trap had worked. But the cost was a family's unraveling, and I sensed Holmes' mind was already turning to the final confrontation, where the last secrets would be laid bare. Chapter 12. Twist in the Bobbin. The workshop of Thorne and Daughters, once a haven of delicate artistry, now stood as a sombre stage for the unraveling of a deadly conspiracy. The late afternoon light filtered through the windows, casting intricate shadows that mimicked the lace patterns lining the walls. Sherlock Holmes and I had returned from the church crypt, where Clara Thorne's tearful confession had exposed her as Jonathan Blackwood's accomplice in the murder of her sister, Eliza. Yet Holmes' restless demeanor suggested the case was not fully resolved. A final twist lingered, a hidden knot in the delicate web of clues that only his relentless intellect could untangle. Clara sat in the corner, guarded by Constable Perkins, her face buried in her hands as Margaret tried to comfort her. Thomas paced near the door, his expression a storm of guilt and anger, while Lydia Gray sorted threads with mechanical precision, as if seeking solace in routine. Harrow had been dismissed, his role as a greedy opportunist confirmed but not criminal. Holmes, however, was focused on the small bottle of blue dye we had found in the workshop, a faint, innocuous liquid that held the key to Eliza's death. "Watson," Holmes said, his voice low, as he set up his portable chemical apparatus on Eliza's work table. "Clara's confession explains much, but not all. The dye's composition is critical. If it contains the exact cyanide compound I detected in the thread, it confirms her role in preparing it. But there's more, a subtlety in the method that eludes us." I watched as he poured a drop of the dye into a glass dish, adding reagents with practiced precision. The liquid fizzed slightly, releasing a faint almond-like scent that made my stomach turn, recalling the poison's signature. "Holmes," I said. "Clara admitted to mixing the dye with Blackwood's cyanide. Isn't that enough?" He shook his head, his eyes fixed on the bubbling mixture. "Her motive, vengeance for the family shame, is plausible, but her execution lacks finesse. Aura is no chemist. Her hands tremble at the bobbins. The poison's delivery, absorbed through the skin via treated thread, required precision, a knowledge of lace-making and toxicology. Blackwood supplied the cyanide, but another hand guided its application." The suspects, sensing the weight of his words, gathered closer. Margaret Sitt's voice trembled. "Another hand? Mr. Holmes, you Sitt named Clara and Blackwood. Who else could it be?" Holmes ignored her for the moment, his attention on the dye. He added a final reagent, and the liquid turned a vivid purple, confirming the presence of prussic acid, but he frowned, sniffing the air. "Curious. There's a second compound, oil of vitriol, a stabilizer to prolong the poison's potency. This is no amateur's work." He turned abruptly to Lydia, who froze under his gaze. "Miss Gray, you sit being silent. As Eliza Hepst's apprentice, you handled her threads daily. You dyed the blue thread, under clearest instruction, but you knew its purpose. Didn't sit you." Lydia Sett's hands shook, dropping a spool. "No, I told you. I followed orders. I didn't set and know it was poisoned." Holmes stepped closer, his voice relentless. "Yet you understood Eliza's codes, her techniques. You saw the notebook, recognized the thorn motif as a map, and you sold patterns to Harrow, proving your ambition. The dye's stabilizer, oil of vitriol, is a lacemaker's trick to fix colors, taught to you by Eliza herself." Lydia Sitt's eyes darted to the door, but Constable Perkins blocked her path. I only wanted to learn," she stammered. "Eliza promised me a future, but she kept secrets, hoarded the fortune Sipp's clues. I was angry, yes, but I didn't set killer." Holmes produced the real notebook, opening it to a page glowing under his ultraviolet lamp. "This cipher, Miss Gray, names not just Blackwood, but a second set of initials, L.G. Your initials. Eliza suspected you, wove your betrayal into her lace as a warning. You worked with Clara, not out of vengeance, but for the fortune itself." Clara gasped, rising. "Lydia, you knew?" Lydia's composure shattered, her voice rising to a wail. "It wasn't supposed to happen. Blackwood approached me months ago, said he knew about the fortune. He promised me a share if I helped. Clara was easy to manipulate. She hated Eliza's obsession with the past. I mixed the dye, yes, but Blackwood told me it would only make her sick, not kill her. Holmes' sticed eyes gleamed with triumph. The twist in the bobbin, Watson. Lydia, not Clara, was the true accomplice. Clara Stist's guilt was emotional, her actions impulsive. Lydia Stist's were calculated. She prepared the poison, knowing its lethal potential, to secure the fortune and her place in the guild. Thomas roared, lunging at Lydia, but I restrained him, my military strength holding firm. "You betrayed us all," he shouted. "Eliza trusted you." Lydia sank to her knees, sobbing. "I wanted out of this village, out of poverty. Eliza was going to give it all away. Gold, patterns, everything. I had to act." Holmes turned to the group, his voice steady. The murder's method was a masterpiece of deception. The cyanide, stabilized by oil of vitriol, was woven into the thread's coating, absorbed through Eliza's chafed hands as she worked her final pattern, a map to the fortune and a testament to her betrayers. Lydia's skill and Blackwood's cunning made it possible, with Clara as their unwitting pawn. Yet Margaret, tears streaming, clutched Clara Sitt's hand. "Why, Lydia? We were family to you." "Family?" Lydia spat, her voice bitter. "You thorns hoarded everything, glory, wealth. I was nothing but a servant to your name." Constable Perkins bound Lydia's hands, leading her to join Blackwood in custody. The workshop fell silent, the weight of betrayal settling like dust. Holmes gathered the evidence, the dye, the notebook, the poisoned thread, his expression somber but satisfied. "Watson," he said quietly, "the case is nearly complete. The fortune will be returned to the guild, the forgeries exposed, but one task remains, ensuring justice for Eliza." As we prepared to leave, I looked at the lace pillow, its tangled threads now a symbol of truth rather than death. The final twist, Lydia's calculated betrayal, had recontextualized every clue, revealing a motive as delicate and deadly as the lace itself. Yet I sensed Holmes' mind was already turning to the resolution, where Threadhaven's wounds might begin to heal. Chapter 13. Resolution and Reflections. The twilight draped Threadhaven in a sombre veil, the village's quaint cottages and winding lanes now tinged with the melancholy of unveiled truths. Sherlock Holmes and I stood in the parlour of the Thorne cottage, where the tragedy of Eliza Thorne's murder had first come to light. The lace pillow, once a silent witness to her death, now lay bare, its poisoned threads removed and sealed as evidence. Jonathan Blackwood and Lydia Gray were in custody, their confessions unravelling the intricate web of betrayal that had cost Eliza her life. Clara, though complicit, faced a lighter judgment, her actions driven by misguided loyalty rather than malice. The hidden fortune, gold rare patterns, and the ledger of the 1878 scandal had been secured, destined to restore the guild's honour under Margaret's stewardship. Holmes stood by the hearth, his sharp features softened by the firelight as he addressed the remaining thorns, Margaret and Clara, who sat together, their faces etched with grief but also resolve. Thomas lingered near the door, his ink-stained hands clasped tightly, as if anchoring himself against the storm of revelations. "Miss Margaret, Miss Clara," Holmes began, his voice steady but not unkind. "Your sister's genius was her undoing, yet also her legacy. Eliza wove the truth into her lace, a map to the fortune, a ledger of crimes, and a warning of betrayal. She knew of Jonathan Blackwood's return and Lydia's ambition, and she suspected Clara's resentment. Her final pattern was not mere art, it was a testament designed to expose the guilty even in death. Margaret nodded, her eyes glistening. She was always the strongest of us. I should have seen her struggle, protected her. Clara, her voice barely a whisper, added, I hated her for unearthing Father Sepshame, but I never wanted this. I thought Blackwood would only scare her. Holmes' stark gaze softened, a rare flicker of empathy crossing his face. Your remorse, Miss Clara, will be your penance. The law may show leniency, but you must live with the weight of your choices. Thomas stepped forward, his voice hoarse. And the guild, the fortune, can it save us? It can, Holmes replied, gesturing to the wooden box, now in Margaret Sitt's care. The gold and patterns will clear the guild Sitt's debts, and the ledger exposes Blackwood Sitt's forgeries, restoring your family Sitt's name. But beware, wealth invites greed. As we Sitt seen, guard it wisely. I watched Holmes, marveling at his ability to weave justice from chaos. Holmes, I said, how did you know Lydia was the true accomplice, not just Clara? He turned to me, a faint smile curling his lips. The lace, Watson. Always the lace. Eliza's cipher named LG. But the final clue was in the dye's composition, oil of vitriol, a lacemaker's stabilizer, not a chemist's tool. Only Lydia, trained in Eliza's techniques, could have mixed it so precisely. Clara's confession was emotional, but Lydia's betrayal was calculated. Her ambition the thread that tied her to Blackwood. I nodded, recalling the ultraviolet glow of the notebook, its hidden symbols spelling out the truth. And Blackwood Sitt's return. How did you deduce he was alive? The footprints in the garden, Holmes said, London clay, not local soil. The anonymous letter Thomas received, with its lace scrap, bore Blackwood's signature, not a detail only a guild master would know. And Agnes' grief, genuine yet incomplete, suggested a coffin never opened. The pieces fit once the pattern emerged. Margaret rose, clutching the box. Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, Threadhaven owes you everything. Eliza Sitt's memory will live in our work, her patterns preserved, not sold to men like Harrow. Holmes inclined his head. Then our task is complete. Oh, Watson, let us return to London. The fog awaits, and new mysteries beckon. As we packed our belongings at the Weaver's Inn, I reflected on the case, its delicate complexity, the interplay of loyalty and betrayal, and Eliza's brilliance, preserved in threads that spoke beyond the grave. Holmes, lighting his pipe, seemed already distant, his mind chasing the next challenge. Yet I knew this case had touched him, the artistry of the lace mirroring his own precision in unravelling crime. We boarded the evening train to London, Threadhaven fading into the dusk behind us. The clatter of the wheels echoed the click of bobbins, a reminder of the delicate murder we had solved. I opened my notebook to record the tale, knowing it would stand among Holmes' finest triumphs, a case where the subtlest threads wove the darkest truths. Thus ends the tale of Sherlock Holmes and the lacemaker's delicate murder, a mystery where the delicate threads of lace unravelled a tapestry of greed, vengeance, and redemption. Eliza Thorne's legacy endures, her art a testament to truth's enduring power. Holmes' genius as ever cut through the shadows, revealing a resolution as satisfying as it was shocking. Yet the game is never truly over. What mysteries await in London's fog or beyond? What did you think of this intricate finale? Are you listening from a bustling city, a quiet village like Threadhaven, or somewhere far-flung across the globe? Drop your location and thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe to the channel to unravel more Sherlockian mysteries with us. Your support weaves the next tale. Don't miss it.